In 1972, Rayfield had assembled possibly his most talented team at St. Joe and opened the season with a surprise win over traditional power Clinton High School. 9 weeks later, Rayfield had produced his first undefeated team and was positioned for an invitation to one of Mississippi's postseason bowl games. As bowl season approached, rumors began to circulate about the possibility of an unthinkable opponent, the Mustangs of Murrah High School.
I don't think we were really expecting it. I guess toward the end of the season, we started hearing some talk about it, but I really don't think the team thought that we'd actually get invited.
Murrah had this mystique. That was the feeder for Ole Miss. If you had a medium player at Murrah, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to Ole Miss.
Murrah played in the Big 8 conference, which was the conference in Mississippi. It was all the big schools. So this was the top echelon of high school sports in Mississippi at the time.
The idea to match Murrah against St. Joe was such a ridiculous idea that it never crossed the mind of the city athletic director for the public schools until it was suggested to him by a St. Joe graduate.
He was trying to find some place to play Murrah. And I told him, I said, look, why don't you play St. Joe? They've got a real good ball club. That'll bring in more crowd than if you go out state or somewhere. And it'll be an interesting ball game. St. Joe's got a real good ball club. I don't know that they can beat Murrah, but it would be fun to watch. And I think St. Joe would probably bring in several hundred people that you won't get from somewhere else. And you could play it out at the Memorial Stadium, and I think it'd be an awful lot of fun.
All of a sudden, you're pairing him up with St. Joe, who was considered the little, small Catholic school that was a good school and probably good academically, but did they really measure up in football? Who knows? Who do they play?
Bottom line, Pop and I were good friends, and when I suggested, of course, at first he said, no, I don't think we can do that, Con. And then the more he got to thinking about it, the more he said, hey, this is going to help build Murrah up, and we're going to probably slaughter St. Joe, but that's okay. That's what everybody expects.
We don't want to play that little school. They're too small. It won't even be a game. So Murrah didn't want the game. But luckily, St. Joseph had some friends on the paper at that time, the Clarion Ledger, who started these big articles about how Murrah was afraid of St. Joe.
Well, he was so sure that Murrah was going to win, he had the trophy made up in Murrah colors. And to this day, if they've still got the trophy, the colors on that trophy are Murrah colors because he was positive Murrah was going to win, and everybody else was.
When the invitation was officially extended to St. Joe to play Murrah in the Capital City Bowl in Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium, Rayfield did not immediately accept. Rather, he allowed the idea to simmer with his team and made them beg for the game. This was all part of him getting them mentally prepared to take on Goliath.
Let's start back at the last game of the season. It was against Heidelberg. We were down playing Heidelberg, and we had just beaten them. Dad had us in the locker room, and he was talking about he had received word about an invite to play Murrah in the Capital Bowl.
Well, why wouldn't you accept the invitation? What a tremendous opportunity for the team and the program and the school.
But he would tease us like he normally would, saying, I don't know, they're big and they're tough, the way Coach Rayfield would always say. They're going to hurt somebody. They think they can just roll over on us. I'm not sure if we need to go play them or not.
I remember going in his classroom every morning before the first period bell went off and telling him how much we had to play.
He built that feeling into his players. He had it himself. But the bottom line was he wanted to play the game.
And that energized the St. Joe community. I mean, the priests and the nuns and everybody. Everybody was pumped up about it.
Murrah had the meeting where they were going to decide how bad they were going to beat us. 65, 66 points, something like that.
Nobody really thought that they were going to actually win the game. But just being there and competing on the same field with Murrah was going to be great.
And we'd never played in Memorial Stadium before. It was cold, it was drizzling. Weather conditions weren't the best.
Tough, weird environment to play in. And I would say that the St. Joe people had more people at the game than the Murrah people did because it was kind of a physically tough place to be for a fan.
I remember the pregame and being in the locker room at halftime. really being just another game in terms of Coach Rayfield and the other coaches, Coach Howie. It was another game. We got the same kind of talk that we would in any other game.
But in the locker room before the Capital Bowl, it was businesslike. I mean, it was Dad taped up the ankles and wrapped up the hands, and he did what he always did.
Having said that, I think everybody on the team recognized that the game was obviously incredibly important to the program and to us. We didn't want to ruin a perfect season.
The first half was back and forth a little. I think St. Joe pretty much had nerves, you know? Everybody on, just being in the game against Murrah and everything.
Murrah was a big team, and they had a whole bunch of people, and we didn't. And you look at the replacements they would send in and come in, and we didn't have that many replacements.
It was really a tremendous defensive battle.
Of course, there were some eye gouging and things like that, and they, when we started the game, they were saying, y'all shouldn't even be with us. We don't even know why you're playing.
And we got the first 2 points. Paul Rossi tackled their running back. I forgot his first name, but his last name was Burns, in the end zone, so it was 2-0.
There was a lot of hard hitting in the game, and they knew very early on that we were a determined bunch.
And then they scored, Murrah scored.
He clearly stepped out of bounds. So if that play had been called back, which it should have, I'm not too sure if that game wouldn't have ended up 2-0.
Made it 6-2. They missed the extra point.
The teams battled toe-to-toe deep into the fourth quarter, with Murrah maintaining a slim 6-2 lead. As the game wound to a close, St. Joe had time to mount one last offensive attack, setting up one of the most improbable and unforgettable finishes in Mississippi high school football history.
And then I think it was a minute left in the game. We were about, I'd say 60 yards out from the end zone.
I didn't feel good about it because it was just raining so hard, and it was just so hard to hold on to the ball and everything.
I remember Rob Parks, who was the quarterback, throwing a long pass down the sideline that Robert Dow leaped, it seemed like 5 feet in the air, and caught it at its highest point with 2 guys. He was double covered all game.
Robert Dow, probably maybe the best football player that ever played at St. Joseph.
We had no timeouts. He comes down with the ball and he starts grabbing his leg.
Conveniently got injured.
Oh, God, get up, Robert.
But anyway, they stopped the game and stopped the clock with a very few seconds left to go in the game, and maybe on about the 20, on about Murrah's 20-yard line.
Robert Dow has to come off and they bring in Matt Rayfield. Well, they double team Matt, who was our second team wide receiver and coach's son.
They didn't realign the defense.
They fake it to the running back, and then they all roll out to the right.
So I was making my turn, and I was on the goal line. I turned around, saw Kessenbaum come out of their back.
The running back just went over there and stood in the end zone, and my brother threw one of these Tim Tebow alley-oop passes to him just over the top.
The ball's in the air, the horn sounding, and you're thinking,
This just isn't really happening.
Turn around right on the goal line, catch that ball, cradle it in, and just fall back in the end zone, and that was it.
St. Joe won, St. Joe won. I can't believe it, St. Joe won.
Best way to describe it was pandemonium.
Fans just jumped the fence and went onto the field.
That's the only time I've run on a football field other than when I was playing.
And just like I said, the trophy was blue and silver, and everybody expected Murrah to win.
Looking over at the Murrah sidelines, but I see 40 or 50 statues.
They just couldn't believe they lost to St. Joe.
Disbelief, stunned.
They were like 4 or 5 touchdown favorites.
I can remember seeing Coach Bob Stevens' face. It was just like, what happened? What the hell happened, you know?
It was a made-for-TV movie where the underdog beats the big guy.
When you talk about game changes in somebody's life, that night was the biggest night of my life at that point in time.
It was crazy. And so the St. Joe people were still there, and we stayed there in the rain, wet, a long time going crazy that night. It was a great night.
It was the biggest game St. Joe's ever won in the history of the school. It brought recognition and prominence to smaller schools playing bigger schools.